The first thing that we need to do before installing QBOT is to remove the foam pad and the aluminum block that may have been installed between the sewing machine and the wheel carriers. The stitch quality will suffer if these pieces are used with QBOT, as they allow excessive bouncing of the machine, which affects the stitch regulation sensors. In preparation for removing the foam pad and aluminum block, first lift and slide one of the table inserts so that it rests on top of one of its neighbors. The table insert is heavy, so you should have a helper for this step. Move the machine over the open space in the frame and remove the front wheel carrier as shown. To do this, move the machine to the most forward position, then from underneath remove the screw that is holding the wheel carrier. Then from the top, lift the machine up and slide the wheel carrier out. You can rest the front of the machine on the front of the lower carriage as shown while preparing the wheel carrier. The wheel carrier looks like this with the screws removed. Now thread one of the alignment screws that came with the sewing machine into one of the holes as shown. Lightly tighten this alignment screw. Now take a 6mm by 25mm screw and washer that came with the QBOT kit and reattach the wheel carrier to the bottom of the machine. At this point, do not fully tighten the screw. In a similar fashion, with a helper, remove the rear wheel carrier from the back of the machine and thread two alignment screws that came with the sewing machine into the carrier as shown here. Lightly tighten these screws. Now reattach the wheel carrier with a 6mm by 25mm screw and serrated washer. Loosely tighten the screw with a 4mm hex wrench that came with your sewing machine. Both carriers will be fully tightened after the Y-axis drive assembly is installed. The Y-axis wiring harness holder is attached to the underneath of the machine using a 5mm by 14mm screw and slot nut provided in the installation kit. Center the holder between the wheel carriers underneath the machine so the alignment tabs engage the slot, then thread the screw into the slot nut and tighten securely. Next, attach the Y-axis drive assembly brackets to the wheel carriers with the screws provided. They mount on the same side of the machine, one in front and one in back. Now attach the Y-axis drive assembly to the drive brackets using two 1/4 inch by inch long screws and nuts. Tighten these securely. When that is complete, take a look at the wheel carriers. They should be parallel to each other and perpendicular to the body of the sewing machine. Now you can fully tighten the carrier screws underneath the sewing machine. The next step is to install the X-axis drive wire holders. These mount on the underneath of the back rail of the frame using two spring nuts and two 6mm by 14mm screws. Simply pop the spring nut into the bottom of the channel, then thread the screw through the bracket and into the nut. Slide the bracket to the end of the frame. The bracket will be stopped when the slot alignment tab comes in contact with the frame assembly screw as shown. Note the orientation of the finger on the wire holder. The fingers should point to the outside of the frame. Tighten securely. The first step to install the X-axis drive bracket is to remove the two rearmost wheels from the lower carriage. Using the same screws, place the screws through the mounting holes in the X-axis drive bracket, then slide on the wheels, then thread the screw back into the mounting hole on the carriage. Do this for both wheels. Now attach the X-axis drive assembly to the bracket using two 1/4 inch by 1 inch long screws and nuts. Tighten securely. Install the drive wire to finalize the installation of the X-axis components. First, attach one end of the drive wire to the drive wire holder, then wrap the wire twice around the drive wheel so the wire enters and exits the bottom of the drive wheel. Next, attach one end of the turnbuckle to the drive wire and the other end to the opposing drive wire holder. Tension the drive wire by turning the barrel of the turnbuckle. It is very important that the barrel is the only thing that turns. If the eye screw also turns, the drive wire will twist, placing more stress on the wire, which will lead to premature failure. The Y-axis drive wire components consist of two holders, two 6mm by 10mm screws, and two nuts. Attach the drive wire holders to the front and rear of the lower carriage as shown. Align the drive wire holder so the lower edge of the holder is parallel to the lower edge of the carriage. Tighten securely. Attach one end of the Y-axis drive wire to the wire holder, then wrap the wire twice around the drive wheel with the wire entering and exiting the drive wheel from the bottom as shown. Finally, attach the turnbuckle and tension the wire by turning the barrel of the turnbuckle. When properly installed, the drive wire will emit a high-pitched tone when plucked like a guitar string. In preparation for mounting the QBOT head mounting bracket, remove the two lower screws from the rear of the sewing machine and set them aside. You will need them in a later step. Unpackage the QBOT head and attach the mounting bracket to the back of the head using the two screws provided. Do not over-tighten these screws. Next, now is a convenient time to thread the wire ties through the slots in the bracket. One tie goes in the upper left tab, one goes in the upper right tab, and one goes in the slots on the lower left of the QBOT head. Using the screws that you just removed, attach the QBOT head bracket to the back of the sewing machine. Connect the right-angled end of the red Y-axis wiring harness to the Y-axis drive assembly as shown. Place the cable underneath the wiring harness holder and secure it with a wire tie. Remove the excess with a pair of snips or heavy-duty scissors. Connect the other end of the Y-axis wiring harness to the port marked Y-axis drive motor on top of the QBOT head. Next, connect one end of the black X-axis wiring harness to the port marked X-axis drive motor. Finally, connect the power supply to the power supply port. Clean up the installation by securing the X and Y harness wires to the upper left tab using the wire tie as shown. Next, secure the X and Y wires along with the power supply wire on the lower left tab. Working around to the back of the bracket, secure the X-axis wire and the power supply wire to the tab on the right. Create a small loop with the red wire as shown and secure it to the left tab. Trim the excess from the wire ties. Underneath the machine, apply the two strain relief pads to the rear wheel carrier as shown. Loop the excess red harness wire and secure it with the smaller white wire ties and trim the excess from the wire ties. When this is complete, you will not need to get under the machine again and can move the table surface back into proper position. Connect the other end of the X-axis harness wire to the X-axis drive assembly. The last connection to the QBOT head is the automatic start-stop connector cord. Connect it to the top port on the QBOT and secure it with the thumb screws. Secure the wire to the upper right tab using the wire tie. Trim excess. Run the wire up the side of the machine and place it in the slot in the upper arm. Snap the plastic wire anchor into the slot as shown. This ensures that the wire does not come out of the slot at the rear of the machine. Continue to run the wire in the slot and use another plastic wire anchor at the front to tidy up the installation. The handlebar interface splitter box attaches to the back of the sewing head. First, remove the handlebar connector cable from the port. The port is roughly in the center of the sewing head and looks similar to a telecommunications jack. Next, remove the backing from the foam adhesive pads on the back of the splitter box. Plug the cable from the splitter box into the sewing machine port and secure the box to the sewing machine head as shown. Next, plug the handlebar plug into the center port and the QBOT plug into the outer port. There is no difference between the ports, so you cannot make a mistake here. For QBOT to communicate properly with the machine, you must set the number 1 position on the right-hand switch to the start-stop function. Connect the tablet stand to the right-hand side of the sewing machine by inserting the end of the stand into the hole above the handlebar. Secure it with the flathead screw. Tighten securely. There are a few final checks that must be made to ensure the best experience with QBOT. First, ensure that the height of the top of the front fabric bar is the same as the throat plate. If it is higher, stitch quality will be affected dramatically because the fabric is not in contact with the stitch regulator sensors. Next, ensure that the dead bar is approximately 1/8 of an inch above the lower arm of the machine. If you need to raise or lower the front fabric bar, simply loosen the 4 screws on the end cap and raise or lower the end assembly. Take measurements and make sure both ends of the frame are at the same height. You must then go back and check the height of the dead bar. The dead bar can be moved independently by loosening the clamps at the ends of the dead bar, then making the proper adjustments. The final adjustment to the frame is to add the 45-degree front rail support. This support is needed to reduce vibration in the frame that can lead to poor stitch quality. Insert one spring slot nut into the central horizontal crossmember and one spring slot nut into the central vertical leg. Align the holes in the angle brace with the holes in the nuts, then attach the brace with 2 screws. Tighten securely.